Greetings, my friends, Melanine. Welcome back to my channel. I am so excited to talk all about Seelie, or the Light Elves. So we're going to discuss all about fairy and fairyland and what the good side of nature shows. What we learned in the other video talking about the Unseelie and the Dark Elves is they represent the more destructive side of nature, and they can be those types of spirits that we need to be careful around, and we need to be very conscientious and aware of how we treat nature, because those elementals represent the karmic rebalance, basically, of how humans treat nature. There are other spirits that represent the life-giving and healing elements within nature. And so within the personalities of the Seelie Court fairies and of the Light Elves, you will see this light-giving type of behavior and pattern towards humans and all those that they encounter. So I would like to start off with Brian Froud's bit on fairy healing, because that is one of the things that the Seelies are known for. The Unseelie also has healing powers as well, but it is known that the Seelie fairies are the ones that communicated more with humans, gave secrets and nature remedies to humans, and kind of established a relationship. The Seelie fairies are like the bridgeway between humans and the fairy world. So this is what Brian Froud had to say. From the dawn of time, in various healing practices found all over the world, mankind has viewed itself as a microcosm or reflection of all creation. In our bodies move the same cosmic forces that drive the universe. Our blood moves to the rhythms of the moon. Our bones are made of the dust of stars. The human mind and frame embody the ancient mythic principle, as above, so below. To understand ourselves is to understand the workings of the universe. Fairies, too, are primal, natural creatures, agents of the cosmic mechanics that underlie our world. They are intuitive beings, simultaneously in contact with humanity's inner workings and with the inner workings of nature. Like Hermes with his winged sandals, the fairies are fleet-footed communicators, bringing us messages from the depths inside ourselves and from the cosmos. From out of the chaos comes form. From out of darkness comes light. As it emerges from the pure consciousness of the world's soul, a fairy coalesces into energy, into pulsing, flowing light. Gradually, it manifests itself in a form eloquent of function, molded by emotion. The higher spiritual fairies, or angelic devas, the shining ones, are manifestations of pure thought, giving shape to natural forces and natural processes, and also acting as guardians and healers if we so desire. These higher fairies rarely take an anthropomorphic form. Rather, they are experienced as vortices of ever-changing light patterns, a rushing flow of auric forces constantly changing in shape and color in response to changes in consciousness. Here, in these luminous flowing forms, is an outpouring of transformational power. All things in their primary essence are made of pure energy, including human beings. Harmony in the body's energy field is essential for health and well-being. Interaction with fairy energy forms, especially the higher angelic ones, enhances our vital energies and helps us realize the potential of our own fully functioning forms. In other words, fairies can heal when approached with the proper respect. The good fairies are agents of self-growth and transformation. And by making an active connection with the fairies, you can invoke their powerful healing forces and the healing forces of the cosmos. Each figure and symbol is representative of vibrant, mythic, universal truths, and each truth holds within itself an ancient spiritual force. To meditate upon a mythic truth is to connect to its inner power. Let your heart connect to it. Allow the light to expand into your consciousness and experience a beautiful golden web of infinite connection and be restored by pure spirit. At this level of fairyland, there is no dogma, everything coexists, and everything is in harmonic relationship, encompassing, flowing, changing, transforming, and renewing itself. To engage with this positive power, stay open, and the fairies here will speak to you. Let them enfold you in fairy light. If you desire a specific healing, then direct that thought through the imagery to the light energy of the fairy realm. The force of this light and energy is powerful on the astral plane. It can be directed outward to heal someone or something else, or inward to heal yourself. So one of the ways that the fairies have been known to interact with humans through many folklore and many tales is that the fairies were representatives of self-healing or self-transformation and growth. So, of course, they taught this ancient art to humans. And so they helped humanity connect back with nature. When once humans started to make their homes outside of the forests, they started to prioritize things that were not in alignment with Mother Earth. This ended up being conflicting with the natural energy of humans because they are born also from the elements and come from the stars. And so the Seelie Fairies, the court of the Seelie Elves and Fairies, have decided to be the teachers of humanity, to help them, to heal them, to be a bridge where there has been a pathway broken between nature and humans. So that is what the Seelie Fairies represent. And although the Unseelie can also help to connect humans to nature, a lot of times they're the ones that don't want to take on that type of responsibility or that relationship with humans. The Seelies do. Morgan Daimler, one of the fairy researchers of our time, I asked her to give me another quote, because she gave me one on the Unseelies, to give me something about the Seelies that she wanted to say. And she said this: from the winter court, the darker fairies who hold sway in the winter months, there is a balance of the other side. And to balance that this time, I'd like to look at things I've learned on the opposite end of the spectrum, from the summer court. The summer court, or more commonly known as the Seelie Court, are those who are generally more kindly inclined towards humans and more likely to help us and willingly interact with us. Their lessons naturally reflect what you might assume is more in line with their nature, although it's always worth bearing in mind that they are not 100% safe to deal with. Like their darker counterparts, they can be moved to do harm as well as to help. They are just less inclined towards it. So this less inclination to harm humans comes from a place of understanding and comprehension. Many of the light elves and the Unseelie, it comes with actually putting themselves out there and interacting with humanity. And so they have learned how to understand humans more and to connect with them and find the common denominator, because all things have come from what humans have called God. So has fairies. They are from the same primordial source of all matter that has formed this universe. And so the Seelie Fairies is something that many of you may resonate if you come into this world as a helpful soul. If you feel somewhat like an earth angel, you like to assist humanity, you like to help others, you feel more happier doing it, you feel that it's part of your purpose, it's part of your destiny or your mission in life. Well, this is very much the same purpose that the Seelie Fairies had. Now, one way that you might experience Seelie Fairies is that they are non-interventional, meaning that they don't even really complicate relationships with humans. They kind of stay on their own, and they really don't get involved with humans, and they don't hurt them either. But there are fairies out there that are very helpful, and that's where the folklore comes from, and the different fairy tales of different fairy helpers coming in the middle of the night and making something appear that wasn't there before. It is fairy magic in one way. So there is a transformation that can happen. There are so many different incarnations. As Ram Dass, one of my favorite spiritual guides in human form on earth, said that many incarnations are dreams themselves. And so when we think about our past lives and our different experiences, you may find that maybe you once were a Unseelie and now you are a Seelie, or it can also go vice versa as well. You can also have been a Seelie fairy belonging to the fair folk that way, and then transitioned through your incarnations into the Unseelie path now. And so it really is just about preferences and different life journeys. I have a story about my past life regression that I was able to do and go into a past life experience. My last video on Unseelies, I did talk about one lifetime in which I definitely was an Unseelie fairy, and I definitely experienced the emotions that come with being one of those beings. Well, I did tap into the exact past life incarnation in which I transformed from a Seelie to an Unseelie, because it doesn't happen in death, it happens while living, because it is that very nature of living that actually helps the transformation. So I remember an exact life where the transformation happened, and I wanted to show you so that you can understand and get into the mind of a Seelie fairy or a light elf. My journey is my own, like all wild and free elemental spirits of nature. I want to share a story of my own transformation from an Unseelie to a Seelie. This incarnation was not too long ago, so the transformation is fresh and clear in my mind. In one particular lifetime, I was part of the she. I was beautiful, graceful, a deer-like creature who lived among the fairy mounds of Ireland, known to be dangerous and considered to be part of the Unseelie. I was humanoid, but not completely human. All I can remember are my emotional imprints and memories. I was taught to not speak with humans and to keep the veil up between us, so that they could only see me as a tree or a rock sometimes, and many times could look like a deer and be quick as one as I get away. And sometimes, if I am still as a tree, they would mistake me for that. This is where the term dryad would come from. My forest people would blend in with the trees, wearing nothing but leaves and fur from the naturally fallen animals, as we used all of their gifts. However, one particular day, a man wandered into the woods lost and had gotten into a knife fight with another man over something in his nearby village. He laid down dying of an open wound, and my heart noticed the same tears of death in his eyes from the Sika deers that we cherish in our own clans. I went from hating and fearing humans to wanting to help this particular man, because I recognized a similarity within his eyes, within the creatures that I so worshipped and adored. Something in my soul opened up as I stepped into newfound compassion for humans that I never felt before. I remember slowly moving towards him to get a closer look, and he winced in pain and begged me to help him. It was his left side of his stomach with a small open wound, and I gathered many herbs and leaves that I knew were anti-inflammatory and could help him. I did not speak for a while, but I used my powers of healing that my people taught and shared with others. This man was patient, and he was wise, I found out. I remember visiting him every day to give him water, nuts, and berries that I could find. Soon we became great friends. As I learned of his life and what he did and what he believed, and came to understand that humans do think very much as my people. They too want to love and not fight. They too see beauty in nature, but they are forced to use its resources and to live, he told me. And I taught him that the secret is to remember the natural connection to nature, and when humans replenish what they take after they use it, they will always receive nature's blessings back and not anger the elemental spirits. There can never be imbalance with this system. That life, I learned many things about humans in a way I never did before. Perhaps it was that incarnation when I had my first heart opening for all beings of Earth. Not just nature and plants, but humans too. My love for this human teacher echoes in my soul still today. So now, as I am today, whenever I meet a new person, I look for their story, their perspective, before I judge them unfit or unworthy to talk to. I see the wound first and go towards that, as I did in that lifetime during my transformation. This lifetime now has been a recollection of so many lifetimes, because as an elf walks the Seelie path, they may find humans, fairies, and all souls in the universe melt back into one. And so that is what I learned through my transformation and my journey, becoming a Seelie, going from an unseelie. And that was my particular journey, and it makes me who I am today, because we are always the sum total of our experiences in this lifetime, and our past incarnations are really just our backstories. I wanted to read you one other part here from Brian Froud about the Fairy Godmother. Many of you have heard about the Fairy Godmother. I mean, how many fairy tales is the Fairy Godmother or any type of fairy ever talked about in terms of giving wishes away and helping humans who are in need? Well, here is what Brian Froud has to say about the Fairy Godmother, which is a good fairy or a Seelie fairy. So this is what he had to say. The Fairy Godmother, or Good Mother, as the Welsh call her, is the fairy who brings her special gifts to the newborn. The Godmother's ancestors are the Celtic triple matres, or mothers, who watch over special places such as wells, springs, and the home, and over the course of our lives. And the Greek Fates, the three women who spin, measure, and cut the thread of man's destiny. In Albania, godmothers are known as fatit, appearing the third day after a child's birth to bestow the gifts of fate. And in Latvia, the lume, a household fairy, presides over the three major events of life: birth, marriage, and death. Godmothers are well-known figures in the fairy tales of many lands, where they migrate or mitigate curses and point the way through treacherous terrain, and save inexperienced young heroes from danger and from themselves. In many tales, the fairy godmother must deflect the curse of a bad fairy who feels slighted or offended. In the case of Sleeping Beauty, a bad fairy was not invited to a princess's feast. She took great offense and cursed the child with death at the onset of puberty. But the last of the 12 fairy godmothers mitigated the bad fairy's curse. These stories remind us not to forget to invite the fairies to important events. It is wise to acknowledge their presence and graciously accept their gifts. The moon-wise godmother brings us sacred gifts from the land of fairy, She holds a golden apple from the magic Isle of Apples, also known as Avalon. This glowing fruit of immortality and fertility, creativity, radiates the rich, penetrating warmth of the summer sun. She also brings us the apple's complement, a crystal of pure moonlight, to stimulate clear thinking. And with these gifts of the heart, of sun and moon, of male and female in balance, she asks us to place our lives in balance and to find and fulfill our true purpose. And this is the fairy waters of wisdom. From the hands of the White Lady of the Fairy Well, pour the wise waters of fairyland, sweeter than the finest human wine, smelling of honey and sun-baked earth. Fairy spirits have always been associated with wells and springs, meditating and bringing the healing properties of water and bringing hidden natural knowledge of the earth to light. This bright queen pours forth an endless flow of sparkling purity while surrounded by the fairies who cure various physical complaints, arthritis, skin disorders, gout, and a wart. Fairy in very ill temper can help also, but the fairy wells and sacred springs were considered potent sources of healing by ancient people all around the world. And here in the west of England, the old wells buried in the Cornish countryside and the famous Chalice Well at Glastonbury, where the Holy Grail is said to be hidden, are visited to this very day by those seeking cures and blessings. So the fairy lore and all the tales always talked about that there were some fairy spirits that were very helpful indeed, and they would help humans if they could, and if they found that humans were respectful towards them, and also that they were deemed worthy in some way. Now, when a fairy deems you worthy, it's not that you have to be any type of success or any type of person in terms of what you have achieved in life. It is simply that they are able to go deeper into your soul, into your heart. They're able to actually see the young child that you used to be. They're able to see the dreams, the desires that you held inside of you before you became corrupted or tainted by this world that was cruel to you, and that you might have lost some sense of wonder in you. But the Seelie fairies are able to see that wonder, and they're able to bring them out even further so that you may believe once again in magic, in beauty, in all things shining and bright once again. I wanted to share with you what Tolkien said about his elves in terms of what they represented. Now, there's something interesting about Tolkien's elves in general. They themselves were also exiled if they were on Middle Earth, and if they did not go to Valinor as they had a chance to. They were considered to be the exiles, but yet they still had kindness, and if you treated them right, they would still show that and bestow that type of humility and friendliness towards you. So Tolkien was able to show a character in the elves that was very much like the Seelie fairies, but also had a little bit of a mix of the unseelie in the idea that they might have not wanted to bother with humans, and they also might have thought poorly of humans and dwarves because of what they have witnessed within them over the ages. But the thing about the elves that Tolkien wrote was that they were wise enough to not judge, to not just assume, that everything came from an objective place, knowing the truth. And so here is where we see a great example of a Seelie encounter in the name of Glorfindel. Some of you may recognize what I read to you because this is the part in the movies where Arwen actually stumbles upon Aragorn and Frodo and company, and then she actually goes to help save Frodo and rushes him off to Rivendell. So this is the actual true scene coming from the writings of Tolkien, and I want to show you his character of Glorfindel, who's very much like a Seelie elf. "This does not sound like a Black Rider's horse," said Frodo, listening intently. The other hobbits agreed hopefully that it did not, but that all remained full of suspicion. They had been in fear of pursuit for so long that any sound from behind seemed ominous and unfriendly, but Strider was now leaning forward, stooped to the ground, with a hand to his ear and a look of joy on his face. The light faded, and the leaves on the bushes rustled softly. Clearer and nearer now the bells jingled, and clippity-clip came the quick trotting feet. Suddenly into view below came a white horse, gleaming in the shadows, running swiftly. In the dusk its headstall flickered and flashed as if it were studded with gems like living stars. The rider's cloak streamed behind him, and his hood was thrown back. His golden hair flowed shimmering in the wind of his speed, and to Frodo it appeared that a white light was shining through the form and raiment of the rider as if through a thin veil. Strider sprang from hiding and dashed down towards the road, leaping with a cry through the heather. But even before he had moved or called, the rider had reined in his horse and halted, looking up towards the thicket where they stood. And when he saw Strider, he dismounted and ran to him, calling out, "I na vindu Dunedain, my Govannen." His speech and clear ringing voice left no doubt in their hearts. The rider was of the elven folk. No others that dwelt in the wide world had voices so fair to hear, but there seemed to be a note of haste or fear in his call, and they saw that he was now speaking quickly and urgently to Strider. Soon Strider beckoned to him, and the hobbits left the bushes and hurried down to the road. "This is Glorfindel, who dwells in the house of Elrond," said Strider. "Hail, and well met at last," said the elf lord to Frodo. "I was sent from Rivendell to look for you. We feared that you were in danger upon the road." "Then Gandalf has reached Rivendell?" cried Frodo joyfully. "No, he has not, when I departed, but that was 9 days ago," answered Glorfindel. "Elrond received news that troubled him. Some of my kindred, journeying in your land beyond the Barad-dûn, learned that things were amiss and sent messages as swiftly as they could. They said that the 9 were abroad and that you were astray, bearing a great burden without guidance. For Gandalf had not returned. There are few even in Rivendell that can ride openly against the 9, but such as there were, Elrond sent out north, west, and south. It was thought that you might turn far aside to avoid pursuit and become lost in the wilderness. It was my lot to take the road, and I came to the bridge of Mitheliel and left a token there, nigh on 7 days ago. 3 of the servants of Sauron were upon the bridge, but they withdrew, and I pursued them westward. I came also upon 2 others, but they turned away southward. Since then I have searched for your trail. 2 days ago I found it, when you took the elf stone, and I followed it over the bridge. And today I marked where you descended from the hills again. But come, there is no time for further news. Since you are here, we must risk the peril of the road and go. There are 5 behind us, and when they find your trail upon the road, they will ride after us like the wind, and they are not all. Where the other 4 may be, I do not know. I fear that we may find the ford is already held against us." While Glorfindel was speaking, the shades of evening deepened, and Frodo felt a great weariness come over him. Ever since the sun began to sink, the mist before his eyes had darkened, and he felt that a shadow was coming between him and the faces of his friends. Now pain assailed him, and he felt cold. He swayed, clutching at Sam's arms. "My master is sick and wounded," said Sam angrily. "He can't go on riding after nightfall. He needs rest." Glorfindel caught Frodo as he sank to the ground, and taking him gently in his arms, he looked in his face with grave anxiety. Briefly, Strider told of the attack of their camp under Weathertop and of the deadly knife. He drew out the hilt which he had kept and handed it to the elf. Glorfindel shuddered as he took it, but he looked intently at it. "There are evil things written on this hilt," he said, "though maybe your eyes cannot see them. Keep it, Aragorn, till we reach the house of Elrond. But be wary, and handle it as little as you may. Alas, the wounds of this weapon are beyond my skill to heal. I will do what I can, but all the more do I urge you now to go on without rest." He searched the wound on Frodo's shoulder with his fingers, and his face grew graver, as if what he learned disquieted him. But Frodo felt the chill lessen in his side and arm. A little warmth crept down from his shoulder to his hand, and the pain grew easier. The dusk of evening seemed to grow lighter about him, as if a cloud had been withdrawn. He saw his friends' faces more clearly again, and a measure of new hope and strength returned. So that's the healing of Glorfindel. Although he didn't heal Frodo completely all the way, he did give him a little bit of healing. And we also see a little bit of this light elf type of Seelie Court energy in Lothlorien, especially, and also in Rivendell, when they talk about how Rivendell was a home to the weary and it was a place of rest and peace. But this is the part where they're in Lothlorien, the Fellowship is walking, and this is what they're talking about here. "Say, not unscathed, but if you say unchanged, then maybe you will speak the truth," said Aragorn. "But lore wanes in Gondor, Boromir. If in the city of those who once were wise, they now speak evil of Lothlorien, believe what you will, there is no other way for us, unless you would go back to Moria Gate, or scale the pathless mountain, or swim the great river all alone." "Well, then lead on," said Boromir, "but it is perilous." "Oh, perilous indeed," said Aragorn. "Fair and perilous, but only evil need fear it, or those who bring some evil with them. Follow me." Now, I really like this part here where he said that, "Boromir, your people of Gondor, they used to understand Lothlorien and the elves. They used to know about the tales. And this is something that they lost contact with. They as the world became more material, as humans started to quest for power and to try to dominate each other's lands and resources, they actually grew away from their connection to Lothlorien and to the tales of the elves. So what he's saying is that, Boromir, your people once were wise, and they heard of Lothlorien, and they understood that there would be no danger unless you brought danger to Lothlorien yourself, because that is what it is. Like when Morgan Daimler was talking about that the Seelie Court fairies, even though it stands for silly, that's where the word comes from, still the Seelie Court still had to be respected by humans. So they were not completely always lenient if humans tried to do them harm, or humans try to do harm to their environment. There would be a connection to the humans to let them know that, hey, what you have done is maybe not the best choice and we need to work on this. But at the same time, there would also not be retribution or revenge. So it was still a lesson for humans. They still learned a lesson from wandering into places where they were not welcomed, and the idea that they had no consciousness or awareness of the force that they were walking into, that to them it was just a place to try to dominate and take over. There's a lesson in that. But what Aragorn was trying to say is that there's no evil here in Lothlorien unless You yourself are evil, and it will be reflected back to you. But that is the nature of the Light Elves, the Vanyar, those that are closest to the light of Valinor. They still remember the light, and part of it is with the Gladriel, the people of Gladrielle, because Gladrielle herself is the Lady of Light. She is one of the elves that remains on Middle-earth in exile, but she also once lived in Valinor, and she remembers the light of Valinor. And she kind of exiled herself, because when the other Noldor elves around her were not allowed to go to Valinor or to sail back, she decided to stay as well. And it was a little bit of a sacrifice on her part to do, but she is not evil in any way. And Aragorn was trying to tell that. And then especially when you meet Gladriel later on and you see all the gifts that she gives the fellowships. But at the same time, don't take advantage of the Light Elves. Don't try to take advantage of the Seelie Fairies, because they will try to teach you a lesson. And depending on your intention, depending on how much they read into your soul and into your heart, knowing if you really are somebody that intends to do evil towards them and to others, then they will know about it. Cannot hide from the fairies. I wanted to read to you a very important part, and it might answer some questions that many of you might have had. What is the difference, or where does angels and light elves or Seelie fairies kind of lie? Like, if fairies that are good and light elves that are good and want to help humanity and heal them in need and things like that, why aren't they angels? Well, here is a part from the Philosophy of Tolkien by Peter Kreeft. And this is basically a philosophy book all about Tolkien. So it's a very good book here. So he took on this question: could there be creatures between men and angels, such as elves? One reason Tolkien did not bring the Valar more directly into the Lord of the Rings is that they would have lowered the elves, made them less distinguishable from men, less awesome, less like angels. For elves are semi-angelic beings in the Lord of the Rings, both in themselves and to us. In themselves because they are semi-immortal, and to us because when we look at them, we look in the direction of the angels. Just as when a crab looks up from the bottom of a pool at the fish swimming near the water's surface, it looks in the direction of the birds, air, and light. Elves are not, like the Ainur, pure spirits that can assume bodies as we assume clothing. Nor are they mortals like us. Their bodies are immortal as long as the matter of this world lasts. And if their bodies are killed in Middle-earth, their spirits return to the halls of Mandos and are given new bodies by reincarnation. Tolkien writes, the elves represent the artistic, the aesthetic, and purely scientific aspects of the humane, nature raised to a higher level than is actually seen in men. This is from Letters of Tolkien, where he said this, and the movie has them fight alongside men and dwarves and hobbits at Helm's Deep, a legitimate extension of the friendship between Legolas and Gimli, to show the alliance of all the good species and the involvement of all the spiritual warfare that is the main theme of history. One reason both elves and dwarves are so common in pre-modern literature is that they represent roughly the spiritual and the physical, soul and body, angel-like and animal-like halves of human nature. In The Lord of the Rings, however, the contrast is more between elves and hobbits, who are neither artists nor scientists nor seers, but humble, earthy, creature comfort-loving homebodies. That's the hobbits. An author succeeds if we recognize parts of ourselves in each character, but Tolkien aims higher. We recognize parts of ourselves in each species, and elves and fairies are not quite synonymous, but they are overlapping. And when Tolkien writes the most insightful essay ever written about fairy tales, he is writing about elves. Indeed, he makes the connection. Faeries drama, those plays, which according to abundant records, the elves have often presented to men, can produce fantasy with a realism and immediacy beyond the compass of any human mechanism. As a result, their usual effect upon a man is to go beyond secondary belief. If you are present at a Fairy drama, you yourself are, or think that you are, bodily inside its secondary world, as the four hobbits felt at Tom Bombadil's house in the Fellowship of the Ring. To the elvish craft, enchantment, fantasy aspires, and when it is successful of all forms of human art, most nearly approaches. Here is the clue that solves the great Tolkien puzzle. The puzzle is why, of all humans who ever took pen to paper, Tolkien has produced by far the most convincing, desirable, beautiful, believable, and awesome elves. And the answer is that he must have been an elf, or at least he had elf blood somewhere in his ancestry. For if any work of literature in the history of the world is a fairy drama, it is The Lord of the Rings. The existence of elves, or something like elves, is widespread in pre-modern cultures, and over half of the world's most literate nation, Iceland, still believes in them. That's why their wilderness roads take sudden turns to avoid disturbing the elves. When the word is used today, most people snicker, but most pre-modern accounts are far more angelic, more transcendent, and more wonderful and more formidable than the silly Tinkerbells of modern literature. Tolkien writes that they represent really men with greatly enhanced aesthetic and creative faculties, greater beauty and longer life and nobility, the elder children. They are not evil like Sauron, who always wants to sing, "I did it my way." But they are foolish because they sing, "I believe in yesterday." We too are foolishly elvish when we want to hold on to our youth, or the initial experience of falling in love, or when we seek the enoughness of eternity that we all innately long for in places where it can never be, somewhere in time. The same philosophical arguments for the existence of angels that we saw C.S. Lewis use could also be used as probable arguments for the possible existence of elves or other species between the human and the angelic. That they are fallen angels, in other words, or devils, but no agreement was achieved as long as the fairies remained at all. They remained evasive. And so now we start to see that they are angels, but a special class of angels who have been, in our jargon, demoted. That they are the dead, or some special class of the dead, or some type of spirits that are unseen. And so that is the connection between the elves and the angels. To many people, they are synonymous or they are very similar. Brian Froud had a wonderful quote that I found in which he said this, which I thought was really lovely and I wanted to share. This one is, "Fairies take us to a land where wisdom is inseparable from whimsy and where leprechauns dance with angels." So more so the Seelie fairies are that connection between angels and humans. They lie somewhere in between. And maybe it's said that a Seelie elf or fairy is an angelic and even can evolve even to a higher place of the divine, even from that place. Who knows? But I will tell you that I have experienced a transformation. And one of the things that I have learned is that it is about seeing the beautiful and wanting to share that beauty with others. Understanding where people come from and having a comprehension of where their pain is. And if you have the art of healing, then use it on others. That will get you in touch with your Seelie side, very much indeed. So that is what I have to share today about the Light Elves and the Seelie Court. I am going to leave on my channel an actual Celtic fairy tale that will go through kind of an old wives' myth, the idea of the good housewife and the Seelie fairies. And it's a common pattern that you will see when there is a human in need, and then you will have the help from the fairies because they know your needs, they know your desires. And so you never have to feel alone with the Seelie fairies around. You never have to worry because you know that these good spirits are going to see you. They're going to understand you. And so I'm going to leave that on my channel. I'm not going to do it here because it's a long story, but it will be there for you to listen to and just kind of enjoy the story about the Seelie fairies that come to help the good housewife. And this is an anonymous tale from an old Celtic Irish fairy tale. So we'll go to some comments. I know there's going to be a lot, so we'll talk about it and we'll have a nice discussion. So it's so great to see everybody today. So Naren says, this reminds me of Arion, the universal mitigator sequence. I take it no one has heard experiences. I'll share it soon to the new movie. Okay. Would share it with us if you can hear, Naren, because that would be great. I would love to hear what is bringing kind of the connection to you. That'd be really fun. Christina, this brings back memories as a child when I was at school and saw a fairy on the tree branch. I was feeling a bit lonely and her presence healed and cheered me up. Yeah, that's what the Seelie fairies will do. For sure, they will. Because the reason is, what I have learned is that in that type of form, that spirit form, which can take shape at will, and they are in this dimension and in another, and they kind of blend in and out of different dimensions, they don't sense pain in the same way humans do. And I'm talking emotional pain as well. Their etheric body is a lot more closer to the divine source of stillness. Just like how you see nature. Nature has cycles. It goes through death and rebirth and destruction and healing and growth. But there's really no emotional suffering that is involved in it. That is how the fairies are. And they would like, well, the Seelie ones would like to teach humans how to embrace that, how to alleviate their own suffering and to reach a place of healing, to remember that deeper connection to nature. So yeah, that sounds very much like you met a Seelie fairy. You bring up a really great point, Christina, about UFOs. If it is that wonderful, and I have a fair share of UFO experiences too. So I actually just got done watching Fairy Faith, which is an old DVD of mine, and I think you can actually get it free on YouTube, pretty sure. I think it was made around maybe in the 80s, 90s, probably around more the 80s. And one thing that is kind of well known to a lot of fairy researchers in terms of those that look into folklore and tales, a lot of them are about abductions. A lot of them, are about wandering to the woods and then people never coming back. a lot of them do have connections to otherworldly beings that also abduct humans. So there is a connection between aliens and what we think of as fairies. I would say that there's a very strong connection. So, bridging that gap between aliens and fairies on Earth will help humans understand more about the beings that are around them and what they want, what the different aspects of these extraterrestrials or these fairies want from humans. Some do want a more solid connection, relationship, and to heal and to help. Some do not, and so there is a connection to that. We see that with extraterrestrials as much as the fairy world too. I'm glad you brought that up. And oh, Noreen, that's such a nice compliment. Thank you. A fair elven voice. Oh, that's really nice, because sometimes I think it just irritates me when I hear it. So that's really nice to hear. Thank you, Hannon Lay. Oh, you guys are so sweet. Who has... So on God, are Seelie mischievous? Well, they're known as silly. So mischievous in a way where they don't do harm. Now, if you mess with them, if you run after them, if you poke at them, if you're trying to search for them and they don't want to be bothered, yes, they could do harm back. But they generally are not inclined to, as Morgan Daimler said. So yes, they are mischievous. They can play pranks, funny little pranks, and the more you learn to laugh with them, which is really at yourself, at your own misfortunes, the closer you can understand the Seelie spirit. Because the Seelie spirit is very silly, very lighthearted, very fun, very free. Some of them are more serious and more more reserved, kind of like the elves that Tolkien wrote in Rivendell or in Lothlorien. But at the same time, there is a great, capability of experiencing joy. Like they had Trula Hallmay, that was like a holiday festival at Rivendell, sitting around the campfire and telling stories and drawing the log together. There are always fests and dancing and lots of merriment. That's what the elves of Tolkien represented too. So very much like the Seelie, they also represent that. They just might not be as tricksters or mischievous as other types of Seelie fairies in the past, because Tolkien wanted to kind of make his elves grow up a little bit and represent more of a closer connection with humanity, and maybe represent the higher self within humanity that all humans can attain, a sense of maturity, emotional maturity, and spiritual maturity. That was a long answer to your question, but yes, yes, on God, they can be mischievous too, just not as harmful. Yes, Christina, you answered it well. Good question, on God. I think they can have a playful side, but not as much as the forest ones. They're still considered the forest people. It's just that it's just a branch in ideology towards humans. And so the schism that I talked about in the other video about the Unseelie, then you had people, it's just like political parties that we have today on Earth. You have some that feel that peace will be had going towards this method, and you have the other people thinking, no, this is towards peace. So that's what happened with the fairies. There were some fairies that divided themselves from each other because one half of the fairy realm and many different clans and tribes did not want to get to know the humans. They saw enough. They saw they were loud, stupid folk going through the forest and very unaware of the spirits there. And then you had the other ones who were like, wait, there's something gentle, there's something hidden within these humans that just needs to be brought out. It just needs to be kind of enchanted a bit to come out and come forwards. Nurin, Gladriel's my favorite. My favorite part of her is the non-canon scene in the last Hobbit movie, her versus Sauron, and that's the one I love. That's the Gladriel we would have if she'd taken the ring. Yes. Oh, and that's the other part. Thank you for reminding that about elven magic. So I have said this several times in the elven magic video that I made, but I will leave it here for you too, because this is important. Goodness to Tolkien meant having the power and not choosing to use it to dominate over others. He made an incredibly powerful species as the elves, but yet they didn't try to dominate humans. They didn't try to enslave hobbits, but Sauron did. And his Dark Army was made just for that. So what Tolkien said in his letter is this: I have not used magic consistently, and indeed the Elven Queen, Gladrielle, is obliged to remonstrate with the hobbits on their confused use of the word, both for the devices and operations of the enemy and for those of the elves. I have not, because there's not a word for the latter, since all human stories have suffered the same confusion. But the elves are there in my tales to demonstrate the difference. Their magic is art, delivered from many of its human limitations, more effortless, more quick, more complete, product and vision in unflawed correspondence, and its object is art, not power, subcreation, not domination, and tyrannous reforming of creation. The elves are immortal, at least as far as this world goes, and hence are concerned rather with the griefs and burdens of deathlessness in the time of change than with death itself. The enemy, in successive forms, is always naturally concerned with sheer domination and control. And that is what you see with the Seelie Court fairies. He understood this, that subcreation with humans, not domination, certainly not control, and even not isolationist kind of behaviors where they didn't ever want to talk to humans, but they would. And that's why we have a lot of fair folk today, or fae folk today. They are a product of ancestry of elven and fairy blood mixing in with humans and mingling, because it did happen. And this is why we have many souls today that do resonate with fairies and fairyland and feel their calling towards it, feel something moving them towards it, because it's part of you and it makes up your ancestry and your bloodline too. Yeah, so Gladrielle, Christina, I read that Gladrielle was a prime example of one who could have had all that power. And she is demonstrating her ability to let that power go. When she is given the ring by Frodo and she simply says, no, I'm not going to take it. I remain Gladrielle. I'm here, and I'm going to move to the west when I'm done, when you drop off that ring in Mordor, then I go. She didn't decide to stay on Earth and dominate and control. There is a difference in the way that the elves view power, and even humans too in Middle-earth. Humans, if you listen to the very beginning of the movies and if you read the books, you'll see that there is example of humans always wanting power over others, always dominating and control. And the elves and the fairies certainly didn't want it, and certainly the Seelie or the Light Elves would not. And Christina says, I was at the river and felt something holding me. It was a vine, but it spoke and said, I have to go now. Please let me go. And I promise. Something pushed me into the water. Oh, it's as if they wanted me to stay longer, but I already spent much time. Yes, there are some very playful ones. So this is what happens because your consciousness takes you to the next journey. Your consciousness moves you to the next adventure. So as you open yourself up to the spirit of fairy and the playfulness and wanting to connect to fairy, trying to bring in that light of healing into your life, as Brian Froud was talking about, you will make connection with those spirits. You will sense their energy and their presence in your life because that is the reality that you are forming, and it is very real to your experience. Nobody else may be able to see it, but you may feel it in your heart and know it as truth to you. And this is why in the fairy faith, you have people that still believe in fairies, and yet they never have seen them with their eyes, but they have seen them with their heart. And so this is that relationship between humans and fairies. It develops, it becomes stronger the more that you kind of open up that portal. You're more receptive to them. You're more happy to have them part of your life. And it really does come back when you start to reconnecting to nature, loving every aspect of nature, understanding all its cycles and seasons within it. And then you'll start to feel the fairy energy around you. Peachy Fruit. I remember they mentioned that in the Hobbit movie, they wanted Gladrielle to feel more powerful even when overburdened by darkness. Yeah, she ended up not taking the ring. And so that in many ways was her triumph over the shadow. If we want to get Carl Jung's psychology here, that was a triumph over the shadow. And that's what Tolkien was trying to say. And each of us have those moments where we can take that power. We know we can dominate over others. We know when we can hurt others. We know when we can, make someone cry. We can do that to others. And then we choose the higher road. We choose to walk away from that searching for external power, and we feel it more inside of us. I wanted to share with you a really beautiful quote that Ram Dass said, and I believe that this is how the transformation happens, where you start to kind of understand the nature of light elves and the healing that comes from the Seelie fairies and all of that. This is what Ram Dass said. Start with your peace and compassion, and then go from there. Love everyone and everything. And that I thought was so beautiful because that is exactly the transformation I personally experienced, going from an unseelie to a seelie and experiencing my love literally expand, because my first type of love was for my clan, my tribe, my people. I was very selfish. I only wanted to kind of know myself and my family. And then over my incarnations, I ended up expanding my love, expanding my sphere of understanding and really my love for others. That's exactly what Ram Dass said. That's exactly been my experience. So if you're interested in this kind of transformation, if you want to go down the Seelie path and you've been an unseelie like me before, then start with love inside. The peace that you have within you, let it shine outside of you. Let it extend outward to others. Let it enfold all that come into your life, and you will see that this love, this power of love, grows and grows and grows. And the most wonderful thing that I have experienced is that with love, with loving humans, with understanding, with healing. And I froze. With all of that, you can truly start to heal the earth together, working as a partnership in taking care of the planet. And so that is really all I have to say. I guess I froze again. I'm giving too many secrets away. If you want to stay on, I'll try to come back. Let's see if I can. I seem to be working now. I'm back. Yay. So yes, that is the secret. And Loki, don't forget, you cannot love every single person. We are all humans after all. We all have limits. Likey? Oh, that is not my experience. So love does not mean that you have to receive love back. It can simply mean that you understand someone, that you comprehend their pain and what they are experiencing. Why are they acting that way? You know, if they're acting nasty and cruel to you, you go deeper. You have to go into their levels and understand that it is there because of what they have experienced, part of their personal story, and you can love them for that. That is my experience. That might not be yours, but yes, I have actually experienced that you can actually love every single person, every single being, every single animal, every single being in this universe, and they don't have to love you back. And honestly, that is an experience that, you know, you just have to kind of awaken to. And, you know, that's just a journey that I have gone through. But choosing to love some, choosing to not love some has not done any type of service in my life and for the world. And that is what I have discovered. And so I would say that my experience has been that you absolutely can love every single being, but only when you get to a place where you can really let expectations go from others. So if you look into Stoicism, Likey, you can learn how to do this. Stoicism is all about that, looking into the heart of a society or of humanity and understanding how to connect with humanity on a very peaceful level and not let any kind of outside external influences really shake your spirit in a way. So that is what I would have to say about that. Look into Stoicism. Mary Preston, can someone go from being a light fairy to a dark fae on purpose just to learn something and then come back again? Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, Mary. I would say yes. In fact, many are doing that in this lifetime, just as I have done in another lifetime. It is about your personal story. There are some fairies that might have started out on the Seelie path and then ended up having terrible experiences, traumatic events, and through many incarnations, they started to hate humans, distrust humans, fear humans. And so that's what can make a transformation like that happen. Now, that is not wrong. That is their journey. That is their story. They represent that also within nature. also the cautious side of nature and things like that. So absolutely. It just depends your own choices, really. My personal choices have helped me to extend myself towards humans. And so now I'm in this lifetime where I am completely happy to give my time away and to help others and things like that. But that is something that had to happen over time. It doesn't happen over just one lifetime, but there could be that one lifetime, which I kind of pinpointed in a life regression session where I did that switch. And so I saw that. Peachy fruit. Likey, I like to think of it like this. The love we feel for others extends as others love one another beyond your sphere of influence. In that way, we can all love one another. Wise words, Peachy fruit. Exactly. Exactly. And what I have found is that you can love another and truly you don't get any type of, thing in return. But at least within your own spirit, within your own mind, you don't hold or harbor any type of anger or resentment or any type of negative energy, because it is all transformed in you as love. And light is love. To Nietzsche, he said that light is really love. It's an awakening to understand the suffering of all beings and to commiserate with them and to reach a certain point of enlightenment in which you search for all their happiness equally. So in a way, it is about enlightenment as well. Oh, Lucas, thank you. Thank you for saying beautiful channel. I try, I would like to do more videos out in nature. However, I don't live in an environment where I can. It's very noisy around me, but I do try to bring you into the elven realms. I try my best. So thank you. And Ungod, can one be a light elf soul yet feel more attuned to the night? Well, I am. Absolutely. In fact, if I want to reread what Morgan Daimler said, that was a really lovely kind of image that she gave in her research. She has seen a correlation between the twilight and the summer court. The idea of this is it could be any time of day, really. But yes, there's tons of different folklore and tales where a lot of the activity happens at night for the Seelie Court, as well as the Unseelie. But it's just different. So it really doesn't matter if you like the sun or the moon, because I myself really prefer the night. But I have more Seelie thoughts towards humanity. But I truly love the night, as I talked about in my last video. So absolutely. Yeah, it has nothing to do with darkness in terms of aesthetic darkness. It is really about just your ideologies, the priorities that you hold, the basically the opinions of humans, wanting to help them, wanting to heal, wanting to kind of form a bridge between each other, or simply wanting to leave them alone and not do anything like some of the elves did in Tolkien stories. I mean, they just stayed in their elven realms. They did not interfere. So a non-interference is also very Seelie too. Nurin, I don't try to love everyone, I just accept them. So acceptance is love. Love is really just a word, but love has many, many meanings behind it. So what I have found is that love is acceptance, love is understanding, love is compassion, love is empathy, love is knowing a person, love is taking a chance in someone, love is healing a person, love is trusting a person. Love has many ways to express itself. And one of the expressions I have found is acceptance, accepting them in their flaws, in their strangeness, in their weirdness, and being somebody that they feel that they can come to and talk to, and that you're not going to judge them. I can read you a beautiful quote about Gladrielle. She was actually known, that's one of the things that she was known for, is her fair judgment of others. So this is what it says. Lady of Lorien, Gladrielle, was the only daughter and youngest child of Finnefern, prince of the Noldor elves, and of Arwen, who was cousin to Luthien. Gladrielle is described as having been blessed with the ability to peer into the minds of others, and she judged them so fairly, was an eager participant and leader in the rebellion of the Noldor and their flight from Valinor, and in fact the only female to stand tall in those days. She was also referred to as Lady of Light, or as the White Lady, as her fair skin and white cloaks made her seem to shine. So absolutely, being fair, just being an objective person and not judging somebody and accepting them is also very loving, as Gladrielle was. You're tapping into that Gladrielle spirit, Narin. So Christina says, I was poisoned by a friend through a meal when I was helping her. Guess what? I set boundaries, but I saw her sad and sat by her side, offered compassion without putting me in danger again. If someone can hate everyone, someone can love everyone too. Of course, different levels of love. Yes, that's absolutely true. There's lots of different spectrums in terms of what you feel comfortable doing. I would never say to everybody on earth, you need to learn how to love others. This is something that takes a lot of self-reflection, going inward, and also peering into the lives of others. Not in a I guess like a way that interferes with their lives, but more like you're observing people and you're looking at why they make certain choices. So you start to find the core of their actions. And so that is exactly what I would say, Christina, like what you have done with your friend in terms of understanding the core of why she would do that, and understanding that it comes from sadness and whatever else is going on inside of her. I mean, that is you, channeling that Seelie side of you right there, bringing light where there is darkness. Gabrielle, absolutely, young god. I myself am a light being who connects more to the moon than to the sun. Both night and day are equally beautiful in their divinity. Exactly. Well said, Gabrielle. Well said. I like that. Mew Aurora. I love the night, especially when owls fly up right next to me while I'm sitting in a tree by the river. I love owls. That's a wonderful image right there. So yes, love who you can, when your boundaries come down from your own soul, when you no longer have fear, when you can start to connect to people and experience a spiritual oneness. That is what I have found really helped me move into the Seelie path, is really understanding the oneness and understanding that humans and fairies and elves and all those beings all come from the same source. And so when you start to see that, you start to see the whole picture. And that is what helped me move into that place of love and acceptance of others, as Nurin said. And, just really just being a soul that just wants to help. And that comes from a time when I was once helped. when also I have experienced people that trusted me or gave me a chance too. So there are other incarnations that I did not talk about where I experienced the love back to me. And of course, I kind of explained that a little bit with my past life with this one, because that man took a chance on me as a strange looking being that I was, and we became great friends. So yes, that connection between fairyland is through the heart of the Seelie fairy. And that's where the humans can find fairyland if they know how to find it, if they have the respect, if they can follow the laws of fairyland or the rules in terms of being respectful and being somebody with good intention and in sincere heart, then they can find fairy too. And that's what the fairies really represent. Those. So I hope that this gave you some clarity into this and just kind of made you more interested to do your investigations about the Seelie fairies. Stay tuned for my audio video on the Good Housewife, and you will get another glimpse of the Seelie fairies and their helpful ways. Everyone have a wonderful night, and I will see you all on the next video. Namaste.